Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. It was supposed to be just another birthday. Nothing special, just another day on the calendar to mark. But by the time the night was over, I was left with the feeling that everything I thought I knew about my marriage had been a lie. To start with, my wife, let's just call her Amanda, hadn't even remembered it was my birthday until about noon that day. That should have been my first warning sign. For years, she had been the one to plan everything. The dinners, the surprise parties, the thoughtful gestures that I always felt grateful for. But this year, nothing. Not even a text, not even a happy birthday before lunch. Now, I'm not the type of guy who expects grand celebrations or lavish gifts. But for the past few months, something had felt off with us. Little things here and there that I had brushed off as stress from work, or just the routine that happens in any long-term relationship. But as the day wore on, I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me. I had decided to not make a big deal about it. I figured maybe she was planning a surprise or just needed some time to organize her thoughts. But as the day went on, I realized that wasn't the case. I had this sinking feeling that she had forgotten, and that somehow, this year would be different. By the time the evening arrived, Amanda had suggested we go out for dinner, just the two of us. I agreed, trying to keep my spirits up, but deep down, I felt this pit growing in my stomach. We went to a quiet restaurant, one we had frequented many times before. As we sat down at our table, I couldn't help but notice how distant she was. It wasn't just a casual distance. It was something colder, something more deliberate. I tried to break the silence with a joke, but it fell flat. She barely responded. Then, just when I thought the night couldn't get any worse, she looked at me and said, "I think we need to talk." Talk. It was always the precursor to something unpleasant. I had learned that the hard way. About what? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel my pulse quickening. About us, she said, taking a long sip of her wine. The way she said it, the deliberate pause before the word us, made my heart drop into my stomach. I didn't need to hear more. I knew something was coming. Something bad. I should have asked her what she meant, but the words stuck in my throat. The look in her eyes said it all. She was done. I had no idea what had happened, but I could feel it in every fiber of my being. Before I could respond, she continued, her voice oddly calm. "I've been thinking a lot lately, and I think it's time we—" The waiter arrived with our food, interrupting her. It was a welcome distraction, though I could barely touch the meal in front of me. My mind was spinning. What was she saying? Was she going to tell me she wanted a divorce? Was it about the affair that I had started to suspect weeks ago? I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. She kept talking, but I wasn't really listening. I couldn't focus on the words. All I could think about was the way she had been acting recently. The late nights at work, the mysterious phone calls she would quickly end when I walked into the room, the way she would constantly check her phone when we were together. I had tried to push those thoughts away. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who assumed the worst. But I had caught her more than once, giving me the cold shoulder or deflecting my questions with vague answers. And now this? On my birthday? "I think we should see other people," she said finally, the words hanging in the air like an anchor sinking into the ocean. I didn't react right away. I didn't know how to. The shock was too much. All I could do was stare at her, trying to process what she had just said. "We're done, Henry," she added, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite place. There was no sorrow, no regret, just indifference. The reality of it hit me all at once. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had believed about us, was a lie. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was losing myself. I couldn't believe this was happening. Not like this, not on my birthday. Then, without warning, Amanda's phone buzzed. She looked at it, smiled, and excused herself to take the call. I sat there, completely numb, trying to process what had just happened. It was too surreal. She was walking away, even as we sat in this quiet restaurant, just a few feet apart. But somehow, we were no longer in the same world. She came back to the table a few minutes later, still on her phone, still smiling. I knew exactly what that smile meant. The call had been from someone else, someone who wasn't me. I'd had enough. I paid the bill without saying another word. The ride home was silent, except for the sound of her tapping away on her phone. We didn't say a word to each other, not even as we parked in front of our house. She didn't ask me to come inside. She didn't even look at me as she walked toward the front door. That's when it hit me. She had already moved on. I knew she thought I wouldn't do anything, that I would just accept this because I was the nice guy. But there's a limit to how much a man can take. And Amanda was about to learn exactly what happens when you humiliate someone on their own birthday. She wasn't going to walk away without consequences. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to cry. I was going to give her a gift, one that she would never, ever forget. As soon as I stepped inside, I knew that something was off. The house felt different, emptier somehow. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door she had just walked through, and the weight of the silence settled on me. Amanda had already started putting distance between us, even before that dinner. She hadn't even been present when we were together. It was as if she was mentally checked out long before she dropped the bomb on me. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew deep down I had been living a lie. For months, I'd noticed the small signs, her late nights, the mysterious messages, the way her eyes would glaze over when we talked. It was all adding up now. She was already emotionally gone, and maybe even physically too. The worst part was, I had been blind to it. I had made excuses for her behavior, telling myself that everything was fine. But now, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't let it slide either. I wasn't the type to make rash decisions. I wasn't the kind of guy who jumped to conclusions without thinking things through. But the more I thought about it, the more my mind began to twist with possibilities. Was she already seeing someone else? Had she been seeing someone for a while? How long had I been a fool? My hands were shaking as I set down my keys on the kitchen counter, and the overwhelming urge to do something, anything, took over. I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't just sit here and let her walk all over me, not after everything we'd been through, not after all the time I had invested in this marriage. The thing is, I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't even know if I wanted to stay married anymore. But I knew this. She had humiliated me on my birthday, and I was going to make sure she'd never forget the way I felt. The decision was made, but it wasn't going to happen tonight. I needed time to think, to plan. I had to be strategic. This wasn't about making a scene or getting back at her in a petty way. It was about giving her something that would make her realize what she had done to me. I went to bed that night with a mind racing 1,000 miles a minute. The house was eerily quiet, but the silence felt like a storm brewing, waiting to unleash itself. I couldn't sleep, my thoughts bouncing between anger, hurt, and something darker, a deep sense of betrayal. I kept replaying the moments of the evening, the way she had barely acknowledged my presence, the way she smiled at her phone as if there was no one else in the room. Every little thing I had ignored, every sign I had missed, now stood in front of me like a mirror, showing me the truth of our relationship. I didn't know how to confront her yet. I didn't know what I was going to say, or how I was going to make her understand what I had felt. But I knew this. Tomorrow would be the day I took control of the situation. Tomorrow, I would make her realize the consequences of her actions. And just like that, I fell asleep, knowing the next chapter of this nightmare would begin as soon as I opened my eyes. The morning after my birthday was surreal. I woke up to an empty bed. Amanda had already left for work without saying a word. I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt even more unsettled. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you wonder how much you've missed, how much has been left unsaid. I thought about confronting her right then and there, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she had dismissed me the night before. Maybe it was the anger that was still bubbling beneath the surface. I knew I had to take my time, but I wasn't about to let her think she could get away with what she did. I spent the morning pacing around the house, replaying the moments of the previous evening in my mind. Every word, every gesture, every fleeting look between Amanda and her phone, it all made sense now. She had been slipping away, piece by piece, for months, and I had been too blind to see it. I thought I had been doing everything right. I had supported her, been there when she needed me, but somewhere along the way, I had become invisible to her. I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing. I was done being the passive guy, the guy who just takes whatever comes his way. I had been patient for too long. The time had come for me to make a move. I decided to go to the office that day, just to clear my head. I told myself it would be a good distraction, a chance to focus on something other than Amanda and the mess she had caused. But as soon as I walked into the building, something strange happened. I bumped into Sarah, a colleague I had worked with for a while. She was cheerful, always bubbly, but today there was something different about her. There was a hint of concern in her eyes, something she was trying to hide. "Henry," she said, her voice a little quieter than usual. "Are you okay? You look off." I wasn't sure how to answer. What was I supposed to say? That my wife humiliated me on my birthday? That I felt like I was losing everything? Instead, I just nodded and tried to smile. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little tired. Thanks for asking. Sarah didn't seem convinced. She gave me a long, lingering look, but then shrugged. If you need someone to talk to, you know where to find me. That was it. But in that moment, something clicked inside me. I realized that maybe I had been focusing on the wrong person. Maybe Amanda wasn't the only one who was making my life difficult. Maybe I had been taking people for granted, not seeing the signs of what was right in front of me. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to keep myself busy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were slipping out of my control. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, that I could just ignore what was happening between Amanda and me. The more I thought about it, the more I knew. I had to confront her, but I needed to be smart about it. I knew I couldn't just barge in and make accusations. I wasn't that kind of person, but I also couldn't let her get away with this. The question was how to do it. How to make her understand what I was feeling without letting her off the hook. As the day wore on, I realized something else. I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. If Amanda thought she could keep playing her games, I had a few of my own to reveal. And that was the moment I knew. I wasn't just going to let her walk away. I was going to give her a lesson she would never forget. A gift she didn't expect. The next day felt like a tipping point. I couldn't shake the feeling that something huge was about to happen. Amanda hadn't been home much the past few days, claiming she had work to catch up on. I didn't buy it. I knew exactly what was going on. The more I thought about it, the more I realized. She wasn't just emotionally checked out. She was already out the door. I didn't know what to do with this knowledge. It was as though the life I had built with Amanda was slipping through my fingers like sand. The person I thought I knew was gone. And the person standing in front of me wasn't the woman I had married. But I also knew that this wasn't just about her. This was about me, and the way I had been treating myself. I had spent too many years being the nice guy, the one who always played by the rules, the one who kept his mouth shut, even when things didn't feel right. And where had that gotten me? Betrayed. Ignored. Invisible. But now things were different. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. And I definitely wasn't going to let her think she could humiliate me at my own birthday and walk away with no consequences. I spent the day thinking, what was the best way to handle this? Confrontation wasn't the answer. At least, not right away. But there was something else I could do. Something far more fitting. I knew Amanda would be coming home that evening. She always did. And when she did, she'd be expecting me to be the same old Henry, the quiet, patient guy who never rocked the boat. But that wasn't going to be me anymore. I had a plan. It wasn't about getting revenge. It was about teaching her a lesson she'd never forget. I started with the house. I had a few things I needed to take care of, things I had let slide for too long. There was the pile of unopened bills on the kitchen counter, the stack of laundry that had been building up. But there was something else I had to do. I couldn't just sit around and wait. I pulled out my phone and called a friend of mine, someone who had been in the background of my life for a while. Alex. He was a colleague, a guy who always seemed to be around when I needed advice or just a sounding board. He knew what was going on with Amanda, and I knew he'd be able to help me with what I was planning. Alex, I said, my voice a little more determined than usual. I need your help with something. There was a slight pause before he responded. What's going on, man? It's about Amanda, I said, taking a deep breath. I need you to help me make sure she knows what she's been doing. Alex didn't ask any more questions. He just agreed to meet up later. He knew what had happened, but he didn't know what I had in mind. As the evening rolled in, I felt the weight of the decision I had made settling in. I wasn't sure how Amanda would react. Would she try to turn things around? Would she feel guilty for what she'd done? I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't care. She had crossed a line, and it was time for me to take back control. I heard the door open around 7:30 p.m. Amanda's footsteps echoed through the hallway. She called out my name, but I didn't respond. She walked into the living room, and there I was, sitting in the chair, staring at my phone. She looked surprised to see me there. Hey, you're home early, she said, her tone a little too casual. It felt rehearsed, like she was trying to cover up something. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, letting the silence stretch between us. She shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing that something was off. I thought you'd still be at work, she stammered. I was, but I decided to come home early, I said slowly. There's something I need to talk to you about. Her face changed. It was subtle, but I noticed it. A flicker of something behind her eyes. Fear? Guilt? What is it? She asked, but I could tell she already knew. I stood up and walked toward her. Sit down, Amanda. We need to have a conversation. She hesitated, but then sat down on the couch, her body tense. She was playing her part well. The role of the confused wife, who didn't know what had gone wrong. But I wasn't fooled anymore. I don't think we need to pretend anymore, I said, my voice steady, but colder than I expected. You've been distant for months. And last night, you made it clear where your priorities lie. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. I don't want your excuses, Amanda. I don't want you to try and explain it away. You've made your choices. And now, I'm going to make mine. I could see her face redden with anger, but I wasn't scared. I wasn't shaking. Not this time. This time, I was in control. She stood up, her voice rising. What are you talking about? I don't even know what's going on in your head anymore, Henry. You've been. I raised my hand to silence her. No, Amanda. This time, you listen. I walked over to the table where I had set everything up. The things I had carefully planned. Her face turned pale when she saw what I was holding. You thought I wouldn't find out? I said softly. You thought I was just going to roll over. Well, you're wrong. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. The moment of truth had arrived, and she wasn't ready for the gift I had prepared for her. The tension in the room was suffocating. Amanda stood frozen, her eyes glued to the envelope I had placed on the table. I could see her brain trying to process what it was, but she didn't ask. She didn't need to. The expression on her face said everything. Fear, panic, and maybe even a little guilt. You've been careful, Amanda, I said, my voice calm, though it felt like fire was slowly building in my chest. But not careful enough. I've been watching. I know what's been happening. She took a step back, her mouth opening, but no words came out. Her eyes darted to the envelope, then back at me. I wasn't going to let her off easy. I had no idea how deep this had gone, but I wasn't waiting anymore. You're so good at keeping secrets, I continued, almost mockingly. But I've got your secret right here. You thought you were being slick, sneaking around behind my back, but the truth always comes out in the end. Amanda's face went white. She wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. She was terrified. What is that? She finally managed to ask, her voice shaking. I picked up the envelope and held it up, but didn't open it. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Her panic was palpable, and for a second, I felt a strange satisfaction. She had no control anymore. This was my moment. Open it, I said. I think it's time you saw what I've seen. Her hand trembled as she reached for the envelope. The way she handled it, slow, deliberate, only made the moment more intense. It was like she already knew what was inside, but even she didn't know the full extent of it. She finally tore it open, pulling out a stack of photos. The moment she saw them, her face dropped. I watched her as she flipped through them, each one slowly sinking her deeper into the realization of what had been exposed. It wasn't just one photo. It wasn't just a few blurry images. These were carefully taken, moments captured that showed exactly what I feared. Amanda, laughing and leaning into another man. A man I didn't know. A man I never suspected. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. I could see the confusion, the regret, and for the first time in days, a real flicker of fear. But it was too late. She had crossed the line, and now the truth was in the open. You think this is a game, don't you? I said, my voice lower now, but sharp as ever. You think you can betray me like this and walk away without any consequences? Well, you're wrong. Amanda stood there, frozen. I don't think she had an answer. There was nothing she could say that would make it better. All the excuses she had been preparing, all the lies, were meaningless now. The truth was right in front of her, and there was no escaping it. She opened her mouth, probably to apologize, but I cut her off before she could say anything. Don't. Just don't. I'm done listening to your lies. For the first time in years, I felt in control. Not of her. No, not anymore, but of myself. I wasn't the passive guy anymore. I wasn't the guy who let everything slide. You really thought I wouldn't figure it out, didn't you? I said, pacing now. You thought I was too naive, too busy with my own life to see what you were doing behind my back. Well, you were wrong. I watched her, waiting for some sort of explanation, but there was none. She had no words. There was nothing she could say to undo the damage. Here's the thing, I continued, my voice steady. You didn't just betray me. You didn't just cheat. You humiliated me on my birthday. You made a fool of me in front of everyone. And I'm done with it." Amanda tried to speak again, but nothing came out. The weight of what I was saying was sinking in. She knew what was coming next. She knew I wasn't going to sit here and play the part of the wronged husband anymore. "I don't need you to apologize. I don't need your excuses. What I need is for you to understand that there's a price to pay for what you've done," I said. "You'll never forget what I'm about to do." The look on her face said it all. Fear, regret, and something else. Maybe even a small part of her knowing that this was the beginning of the end. And she was right. The next few moments felt like slow motion. Amanda stood there, holding the photos, her hands trembling. I could see the panic setting in. She wanted to speak, to explain herself, but the words wouldn't come. She kept glancing between the photos in her hands and me, as if trying to figure out what I would do next. The silence between us was suffocating, thick with tension and regret. I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. I couldn't believe she was still trying to explain herself. This wasn't about how it happened or why. This was about the fact that it did happen. She had made choices, and now she had to face the consequences. No amount of apologies would change what had already been done. "I don't want to hear your excuses, Amanda," I said, my tone sharp. "You've already humiliated me. Do you really think a simple apology is going to fix this?" She didn't answer, and in that silence, I realized something. This wasn't just about punishing her for the affair. This wasn't about seeking revenge. This was about me finally taking back control. For too long, I had been the passive one, the one who let things slide, who didn't speak up when I felt hurt. But now, I was done being that guy. "I'm not angry," I continued, my voice steady. "I'm just done. Done with the lies, done with being disrespected. You've crossed a line, and now you're going to see what happens when you do." Amanda's face paled, and I could see the realization dawning on her. She had thought she could get away with it, thought she could keep things hidden. But now, it was all coming out, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "I'm leaving," she finally said, her voice shaking. I don't know how to fix this, but I'll leave. You don't have to see me anymore." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't flinch. I had expected this. In some ways, it was what I wanted. She had already emotionally checked out, so why should I be the one to fight for something that wasn't there anymore? But I wasn't going to let her just walk away. Not without fully understanding what she had done. Not without her seeing that I was no longer the man who would let her get away with anything. I stepped closer to her, not in anger, but with a calm certainty. "No, you're not leaving yet. You're going to stay right here, and you're going to listen to me. You're going to understand what this has cost you." Amanda didn't move, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She was trapped, caught between the truth she couldn't deny and the guilt she couldn't escape. And that's when I knew. This was my moment to make her understand. This wasn't about a confrontation. It wasn't about getting back at her in some dramatic way. It was about making her see how deeply she had hurt me and showing her the cost of her actions. "I'm not asking you to stay, Amanda," I said, my voice firm. "But I am asking you to face what you've done. And when you walk away from this, you're going to know exactly what you've lost." The words hung in the air like a promise. The calm before the storm. And Amanda, for the first time in a long while, was listening. Amanda stood frozen, her gaze fixed on the photos, her hands still trembling. It was like watching someone realize the gravity of their mistake for the first time. The room was thick with tension, and all I could feel was the steady pounding of my heart. It wasn't anger that fueled me anymore. It was clarity. I had spent so long in the dark, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that the cracks in our marriage could be patched over. But now, they were wide open, and there was no turning back. "Do you realize what you've done?" I asked, my voice quieter now, but no less intense. "Do you understand the pain you've caused me? The humiliation? I've spent years being loyal to you, and this is how you repay me?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She wanted to apologize. I could see it in her eyes. But there was nothing she could say that would make this better. Nothing could erase the betrayal, the lies that had been so carefully hidden from me. "I know what you're thinking," I continued, my voice steadier now. "You think you can just walk away from this, say you're sorry, and everything will go back to normal. But it doesn't work like that, Amanda. You can't just tear apart everything we've built and expect me to pick up the pieces like nothing happened." She flinched at the words, but I didn't care. It wasn't about her feeling sorry for herself. It was about her seeing the consequences of what she had done. I had been the one who always made excuses for her, always tried to hold things together, but now I had to hold myself together, even if it meant making her face the harsh truth. "I don't know what you expect from me, Henry," she said, finally managing to speak. "I'm sorry. I didn't want this to happen." I shook my head slowly. "No, you chose this, Amanda. Every moment, every decision that led us here was a choice. You chose him. You chose to lie to me, to disrespect me, to turn your back on everything we had." She opened her mouth again, but I raised my hand to stop her. "I don't want to hear it. It's too late for excuses. The truth is right here, in front of us. And you have to live with that." She took a step back, the weight of my words hitting her like a punch to the gut. Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't soften. I couldn't. Not now. I walked over to the table, grabbed the envelope with the photos, and held it up to her one more time. "This is your reality, Amanda. You can try to deny it, try to run away from it, but this is what you've done. And now you'll see what happens when you treat me like a fool." She stood motionless, staring at the photos in disbelief, her face pale. Her tears weren't for me. They were for herself, for the situation she had gotten herself into. But that didn't matter. The only thing that mattered now was that she finally understood what this betrayal had cost her. "I'm done," I said, my voice final. "I'm done being the guy who takes the blame, who stays silent, who doesn't stand up for himself. You don't get to walk away without knowing how much this hurts." I could see the shame in her eyes now. It was the kind of shame that couldn't be hidden behind excuses or fake apologies. It was the kind of shame that could only come from knowing you had crossed a line, and there was no going back. For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of power. Not over her, but over myself. I wasn't going to let this consume me anymore. I wasn't going to be the guy who stayed in a broken marriage out of fear or pity. I was done. And this was my way of showing her just how much I had changed. She was still standing there, her body shaking, but I didn't care. I had said what needed to be said, and now it was time to move on. Time to reclaim my life. Time to show Amanda that there was a price for everything. And that price wasn't something I was willing to pay anymore. "I hope you understand," I said, my voice low and steady. "This is over, Amanda, and you'll never forget how you made me feel." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The damage was done, and nothing could undo it. Not now. Not ever. The silence in the room felt deafening, but I stood there, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It wasn't the satisfaction of getting revenge. It wasn't about making Amanda feel as small as I had felt. No, this was something different. This was the feeling of freedom. The freedom that comes from finally breaking free from someone who never truly appreciated you. Someone who used you and took you for granted. Amanda stood there, staring at the photos, her tears slowly drying as her world crumbled. She didn't say a word, didn't try to justify herself anymore. There was no point. The truth was too clear now, and all her excuses had been wiped away by the harsh light of reality. I wasn't going to wait around for her to make some half-hearted attempt to fix things. This wasn't just about what she had done to me. It was about me taking control of my own life. I was done with the lies, done with the empty promises, and done with trying to be the man she wanted me to be while she was busy betraying me. "I'm leaving," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a plea. It was just a statement of defeat. I nodded, feeling a strange calm wash over me. "You should." She didn't fight it. There was nothing left to fight for. She walked toward the door, but then paused, turning back to look at me one last time. Her expression was a mix of regret and something else. Perhaps it was the realization that the life she had taken for granted was slipping through her fingers. "You'll regret this," she said quietly, but there was no conviction in her words. It was the last gasp of someone who knew they had already lost. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Instead, I simply walked to the window, watching as she left the house, her car pulling away down the street. And for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had taken control, and it felt good. The next few days were a blur of emotions, but mostly, they were filled with clarity. I spent time focusing on myself, rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. I threw myself into work, spent time with friends, and even reconnected with old hobbies I had forgotten about. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive again. As for Amanda, her departure was a turning point for her too. though not in the way she had hoped. The man she had been seeing? Turns out, he wasn't as interested in her as she thought. Word got back to me that she had been left alone. No explanation, no closure, just a cold, empty message. He didn't want her either. It wasn't karma in the grand sense of the word. It was just the universe giving her a taste of her own medicine. Amanda had thought she could juggle us both, but in the end, she lost both. She lost the man who had loved her unconditionally, and she lost the man who had been her escape. As for me, I felt nothing but relief. I had no bitterness, no anger left. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need it. What I had gained was far more valuable than any moment of retribution. I had my dignity, my freedom, and the knowledge that I was no longer bound by the choices of someone else. Life went on. I moved on. And slowly, I began to rebuild, stronger than before. I didn't need to look over my shoulder anymore. The chapter with Amanda was closed. And in the end, I was the one who came out on top, not because of what I had done to her, but because I had finally learned to put myself first. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.